So let's just do a quick poll check, really. What do you prefer? Out of coffee, tea, or juice? Do you prefer coffee, tea, or juice? Do you prefer lunch or midday dinner or evening dinner or tea, whichever one you call it? Do you prefer a main course or the pudding or dessert? Do you prefer sweet or savoury? Eating out or eating at home? A 2-course meal or a 3-course meal? £5 for 1 course or a £6 meal deal? But what is it that we actually want from our food? Is it about nourishment? Is it about comfort? Is it about some kind of nostalgia? Things that we enjoyed years ago? Is it about value for money? Is it about our energy levels? Is it about flavour, tasting good? The people who had come to hear Jesus in the Bible reading had unexpectedly found themselves eating a picnic of bread and fish. And following him and the disciples, they were still trying to understand exactly who Jesus was and what he was about the following day. Jesus responds with saying that he is the bread of life, and goes on to talk about people needing to eat his flesh and drink his blood. No wonder some people found his words difficult. Perhaps we might do too, if we just think about it on a surface reading. What does that really mean? And indeed, the early Christians were accused of cannibalism, amongst other things. And John, as he is writing this gospel, probably had in mind the Last Supper that Jesus shared with his disciples on the night before his death, and the offering up of his life, of his flesh and blood on the cross, as well as the practice amongst the Christian church of gathering to share food with one another that would have incorporated a celebration of Eucharist, or as we call it in the Methodist Church, Holy Communion. But for Jesus' hearers, referring to the manna in the desert that kept their ancestors alive when they were led out of slavery from Egypt by Moses, would have in mind bread as a staple food that keeps us alive, that kept them alive. And bread represents food that is essential to life. If we only ate bread, we might become a bit bored, and we wouldn't be eating a balanced, healthy diet that is good for us. Although there had been the feeding of the 5,000 men, plus women and children the day before, Jesus refers to himself as the bread that is essential for the fullness of life. He doesn't have in mind the physical life for our bodies to function, but everything else that adds, that makes our whole lives rich and satisfied. Being loved and being able to love. Living with compassion and an awareness of our interdependence on others and the world around us and on God. See, I understand that when later in John's Gospel, Jesus talks about being the way, the truth, and the life, this is not something that is just a remote, abstract idea. See, I believe that Jesus presents us with the way in which we are to live and to serve and to love God and those around us as Jesus does and as Jesus did. to live as those seeking to build our lives on truth and not false hopes and dreams, and especially not in ways that distort the truth or seek to deceive. The closer we come to living in the way of Jesus, a way of serving and self-offering love, the fuller our lives become. The richer our lives are with gratitude and an appreciation of all that is good. There is a saying, less is more. We may have less. We will probably need less. Less cluttering up of our lives with stuff that becomes heavy to carry around. Less, which enables us to have a deeper understanding of what is truly necessary for our well-being and wholeness. And I'm not talking about striving to be more like Jesus in our own strength. The way of Jesus is to have a relationship where we live in God and where God's Spirit lives in us. It is to enter into the mystery of the oneness with God. Even though our experiencing of this might be in fleeting moments, and we may find different ways to try and understand and express it, it's those things that become for us the food of life. Whatever is in our lives, whatever delights of life may be set out on our table before us, Jesus reminds us here in John's Gospel that the basic ingredient needs to be him, needs to be Jesus, the bread of life, the essential stuff of living and living in fullness. I wonder what it means to us as we consider that Jesus is our living bread. Our hymn, Jesus the Lord said.